This is the Athlete and Artist Show presented by BSGG. Thank you guys so much for continuing to support the podcast. If you could please subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Athlete and Artist Show. We would greatly appreciate it. Thank you and enjoy the show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Athlete and Artist Show. I am the artist Kyle Forch alongside professional hockey player Zach Boychuk. Today, a great guest joining us. He has trained some of your favorite NHL players and some of the world's most elite talent. He is celebrating 20 years of Crash Conditioning, the founder and owner, Mr. Doug Crashley. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We know you're pretty busy, especially right in the middle of the off season here. So appreciate you taking the time.
Well, looking forward to it. Obviously, I've been watching you guys and knowing who you are for a long time. So glad to be on here.
Awesome. What's your process like right now? Like, are you kind of right in the thick of things, or are guys starting to go back to training camps? I know Chucky just went back to Germany out there, a little bit jet lagged here today, but what's the schedule kind of like for you right now?
Yeah, no, with our players that play European Pro, a lot of them not like Zach have left now. They've either landed recently or are about to go. Some of the leagues are kind of on the NHL schedule, but the NHL schedule is actually later than it has been prior to COVID. Those guys will go back in September, and then the junior guys bounce anywhere from like middle of August to the very beginning of September and August. So it's sort of a staggered start and staggered end for us. It never really gets it's never synchronized.
Okay. And so in terms of the guys in the summer, do you have a set specific training program for each level, each guy, each kind of positioning or role, or how do you design your programs for the guys?
Once we go through our assessments and those protocols, we'll build out programs off sort of the basics of what we expect. And then we make adjustments for the individual. And then that has a little bit of adjustment for like when they leave. I call reverse engineering. That's a BS term. It sounds real trendy, but I just work back. So you work back from when they're leaving, from when they leave to when they are. And that's how you build up programs for players.
Okay. Let's rewind a little bit. So as I kind of mentioned in the intro, it's 20 years. Zach informed me of 20 years of Crash Conditioning. How did it all get started? What was the thing that, sparked your interest into strength and conditioning, training athletes, and then kind of going off on your own and building this brand and this company?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a funny story a little bit. Maybe I enjoy it way too much, but it goes back to even when I played, I had and then even when I graduated, this thing. So when I played hockey, and I obviously wasn't good like Zach Boychuk, but I thought I was playing. I thought I was good. I was a goaltender, undersized and over personality, I guess would be the deal. So I played and I was into fitness. Fitness helped me get there. I was fit. I ran all the time, but long distance running. I had a trainer that out of my local gym back home in Golden, BC. She would give us stuff. I thought, as I was kind of learning, I questioned a lot of things that she would tell us. So that became the beginning of what made me think about what was right, what was wrong. And then when I graduated, it's sort of funny. When I graduated from high school, when they walk you up on the stage, my career aspirations were to be the massage therapist for like the Swedish women's swim team or something like that. Something that would embarrass my mom and make me look a fool today. But that was sort of like, I knew I was into the sort of wellness, fit and athletic performance stuff, even as I was still playing. When I ended up quitting hockey, I got out of hockey. When I quit hockey, I was like, I'm done with this game. I'm never going to wear those CCM tax hats that I wore every day for years. I'm like, I'm done with the game. I'd go to the odd game. I was in Kamloops, BC. I was actually playing in Quesnel, and I left and quit. And I got to Kamloops. My buddies are going to school there. I'd signed up for classes. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go to school. It was like right near the cusp. Like school had already started when I got back. I was late, but I had some friends there. Let's get in school. So when I went back, it was like, no hockey. Done. I'm loving life. I'm going to be a college kid and live the dream and go out on Friday night and go out on Saturday. And then and I was working out and I was trying to get big, and that's all I cared about. I was living a non-hockey related life. And I remember that was really a great idea and I loved it and it was awesome. And then by my second year in school, I started training, helping the players from the college soccer team. My roommate was on the team. I was helping them. That was kind of neat. I'm like, okay, I'm not really into this, but I'm into being into fitness, working out and all the things that are associated with, having your shirt off more than it needs to be. So that's all going well. At one point, I At one point I did. I thought I'll go back and play hockey. I was going to go to Red Deer College, and I toured the college, and I'm going to go back and play, transfer over there, take kinesiology. I was in Bachelor of Science. Because, I was thinking of getting like biological, like conservation, like so not hockey. I'd go see my buddies play in McAllen. I was like, no interest at all. I just love to live the dream and be normal and not a hockey player and be interested. So I get to Red Deer College, and it's cool. I get there, and I'm no interest. I just want to take fitness and train people, and train people to get big and jacked and be part of that kind of bodybuilding world, maybe something like that. And I had this instructor who's new to the school, and his name is Carl Taylor. He's now the head coach of the Milwaukee Admirals, but he was new to the school. He was a hockey coach. It was a sport management class, and I would get adrenaline rushes in class like the first couple of weeks. I was always getting adrenaline rushes. I'm like, man, I got to get off the ephedrine or something. This stuff is messing me up, all the stimulants. When I realized, and within a couple of weeks, I honestly took me a little bit, maybe a month, is that it was him. He taught class the way you teach a hockey team or coach a hockey team. He was loud, he was boisterous, he was passionate. Maybe he swore a little bit. It wasn't your typical class, and I loved it. And in the start of it, probably middle of the class, maybe even back, probably the middle. By the end of it, I'd sit at the front. I was so fired up, and I have no interest in sport business to this day, but it was him. He fired it up, and then talking to him, and pretty soon after that, I started to kind of build my pathway to what I do now. Met a guy that was assistant coach, Mike Kadar, who shortly after that became the strength coach in Los Angeles, the Kings. He was in Pittsburgh, really good dude. They started to help me, at least direct me a little bit, and then I kind of began the beginning of the process that took me to this point now, and went out and worked for Twist Conditioning in Vancouver. Got fired after 2 weeks for reasons that I still don't understand, and took that kick in my ass. And quite frankly, that kick in my ass, that adversity made me, one is I'm half Italian, and I'm super stubborn, and I'm vengeful. So I went after all their clients in Calgary that they were building the program. I stole all of them within the second year. And that's how I was just like, screw you, I'm going to get you back. You want to disrespect me? You're going to have to compete with me. And I went after it, and that's how it started. And Chucky was year 3 of my program. Is that right, Chucky? I think it was year 3, 1 year after Ebbs and like Mike Green, 2 years after Thomas Hickey. And that's how we began the from zero, literally from scratch.
That's crazy. So in terms of the recruitment, you were poaching all this guy's clients. That's how you built the initial business, or that
was part of it. I mean, and I did it. That was purposeful, to be honest with you. And I laugh about it now when I have to let people go. I'm like, well, come after me. But I was super jacked. They called me that when I got out to Vancouver to work for this guy. They called me the recruit. Like I was going to go out there and work, and then maybe come back to Calgary and start it up in Calgary for them and get it kind of going. And so I was a proud member of a team, and it made me a little bit spiteful. And the real reason that we built our numbers was we started going to games, and there's a guy that worked with me who now runs the coaches site, Aaron Wilbur. He was sort of my business guy. He taught me how to recruit. He was doing a little bit of agency stuff. He'd call kids. I learned from him, quite frankly, like, and how to you go to games, you contact people, you talk to coaches. And that's, my first summer, we had nobody. By the time we got going, I remember calling a couple of times. We called Thomas Hickey and his brother Dan. Dan passed away during COVID. Those were 2 of our first calls. The Lee brothers, 2 brothers that played in the Northwest in Calgary, went on to NCAA, WHL hockey, and it began that way. And that's how we kind of built it up. And then call people. Then, of course, all the players that I knew were part of this other program or done stuff with them, I went after them. And I did it. I targeted their guys, to be honest with you. I did it. That was a spite in me for sure. Anyway, we went from there, and obviously going to games. And now, to this day, 20 years later, I go to a lot of games. I don't go after anybody else's clients, but I want to have a feel for my players that train with us. I want to know how they're playing. I want to know the truth behind their game. Watch their body language. Watch how they play. Understand and project what they're going to have, as players as they go. And that's important to me, is to have a real feel for the game. So I go to a lot of hockey to this day, travel around to see players. When Boychuk was in Lethbridge, I probably made more trips to Lethbridge than when I lived there going to school, to be honest with you. I finished my university in Lethbridge, and then a couple of years later, Boychuk was playing for the Hurricanes for Mike Dick and Jeff Bada. And I was down there. Like, what do you think, Boychuk? Minimum once a month for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you started a little program in Lethbridge too, right? You kind of had a branch off in Lethbridge and Kelowna, and growing it quite a bit.
That's
yeah.
crazy.
I think that was a big one. We did that. A guy that I went to school with was in Lethbridge, and he was kind of trying to find his way. So yeah, we started off in Lethbridge, and I ended up moving into Kelowna. One of our former clients, Curtis Johnson, Cujo, his brother Chad Johnson played for the Flames and around the league, the goaltender. He became our affiliate in Lloydminster. I kind of made him go to school after hockey. I'm like, hey, go to Red Deer College, go this route. He met his future wife there. So like right out of Top Gun, I think she was a teacher and he was a student. But yeah, it's awesome. So that definitely, I've been fortunate to have some really cool stories in my life and people, Zach being one of them, and but also those people that I kind of help them grow their brand as well.
So who was your first client to make it to the NHL?
I would be, so from the first year of our summer, so the first summer of our Calgary business, I trained some guys prior to that, some local guys as a kid kind of coming up, but would be, I mean, Thomas Hickey was the first of our clients to make the National League, but the first guy to play in the National League was Mike Green.
Okay.
So it was with the Capitals. I went up and watched him play in Philadelphia, and then went out and watched him college hockey and at Princeton, and University of Princeton, sort of on the same road trip. I remember that, watching him get button hooked and beat by Peter Forsberg. It was on the highlight of the nights for the next year and a half. Forsberg's great play, and rookie Mike Green getting burnt in the gym, or burnt on the ice. But so that was probably my first. That was actually the first time I ever watched a client play in the National League as well.
And were they clients before they had gotten drafted, or did you pick them up kind of as they were already drafted, just before they had played a game?
Yeah, Thomas was just about to get drafted in the Western Hockey League. He was drafted by the Seattle Thunderbirds. Mike Green had been drafted unsigned. It was a lockout year. He was going into his 20-year-old season. He started with us. So then he signed, and then all that stuff happened. So that was great. And that's been the key to, I think, our success, maybe my business success, is I haven't chased guys who are there. I've focused on organically growing our group. From like Zach's in 89. So the 89 group included a whole bunch of really good players. He's in the 90s birth draft because of his late birthday, but Thomas Hickey himself, Mike Connolly, Tyson Sack, all these names that are these top names in Alberta and off to the Western League or college. And then, some get a couple games, they move on. Some had some careers, some didn't make it, but we had a really good group. And then the 90s, which is the Jordan Eberles, the Andrew McWilliams, and guys like that were kind of the names. Jake DeSears, they did the same thing. And that's how I've done it. Sort of like making sure we have good groups, as many we can, and just growing them and hoping that you can help players get to their dream.
And so, Zach, when you first started training with Crash, what was like your initial reaction or feeling going into your first training session? And
Yeah,
Crash's side, what was your reaction to seeing Zach for the first time? We'll get both sides.
yeah, I was actually training with well, I wasn't training. I went to a National Sport Academy school, which is a hockey school in Calgary, and I was supposed to be training with them, but my best buddy, Thomas Hickey, we grew up together, and then my agent said, "You got to start training with this guy. He's the best in Calgary." And yeah, it was only 2 or 3 years in, but I kind of trusted my agent and told my training program at NSA that I wasn't going to work out with them. I was going to do some of their ice times and stuff, but I wanted to work out with Crash. So I remember being a young 15, 16-year-old kid coming in, and Crash is all serious. If you know Crash, he's all business in the gym, and you're going to be doing, back then we were doing lots of inchworms and long warm-ups and getting right into the weight. So it was pretty fun, learning and getting on some turf and hitting the weights.
And Crash, what was when Zach came in for the first time, what was your initial, experience, reaction of him as a player? Like, what did you think?
Boychuk, immediately when you meet Boychuk at a young age, and even today, you realize he's a pretty athletic kid. I think it was at the World Juniors when one of the announcers went crazy about him jumping up and just running up to chase a ball and jumping up on the boards, and what an athlete and all that. Pierre, good job. And then so Boychuk's, we knew about Boychuk's athleticism long before that. I mean, he's got a sister who was a world-class gymnast. He grew up playing as a gymnast. He's athletic. He's jacked, as the guys joke about, man, like Boychuk's so jacked. I'm like, yeah, no, he's a fit little guy, yeah, for sure. But he was so athletic, and so his ability to like make ease of things other guys struggle to do was quite obvious. And then from there, just the ability to keep them driven towards sort of goals and focus on things that made them better.
And 20 years later, or I guess, Chucky, how long now? 17 years later, still working together.
Couple tough days in for Chucky. We'll butt heads. The one year he came back from maybe his first year in Europe, or maybe it might have been late in his North American career. He came back. He clearly been eating a lot of ice cream. I think he told me he gotten into an ice cream at the end of the season. He was eating a tub every night, a little tub of something. Like the first time he ever had little fat dimples. And if you know Boychuk, like he was, the other thing we used to call him was a statue. Like he was a statue. There was no thought of him ever having body fat. He was just absolutely shredded. He could be carved up and painted white, and you could leave him on a countertop. People wouldn't even notice. And so the first time he ever came back, a little bit of fat dimples. Hey, Boychuk, I remember that.
Yeah, I think I went from my normal, 180, 185 pounds to 210 that one summer. I hurt my knee and started eating ice cream and drinking a couple beers. So you had to work hard for me that summer.
Yeah, that was a tough start to the summer for you.
So what is it like when you do butt heads with the player, in terms of, it could be anything. I'm sure it happens on the ice all the time. So from your side of things, and when it happens in the gym, kind of what's your process in terms of like either defusing the situation or, moving forward with that player, either getting them to buy in or understand, why you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that's a pretty regular situation when you're dealing with a lot of players, different ages, different stages. Hockey brings a lot of anxiety. I think everything does, but hockey and the stress of making it is very anxiety driven. And along the way, guys handle their anxieties differently. We have certain players that just, when it's getting close to free agency because they're hard to be around. So when you're dealing with, I think when you're having to battle a little bit with people in general and athletes being highly competitive, mostly alpha kind of personalities, you have to understand that there's more than just what's happening right in front of you. So the layers of what's going on in their minds and emotionally for them, you have to take the time to know what's going on. So the first thing you have to have a relationship with somebody before you can go up, can do that. And I think I take a lot of pride in the fact that I'll butt heads with anybody, but I'll do it. I always used to use a line like, I'll drag guys kicking and screaming to where they want to be. When they're having bad times, I'm going to be there more than anybody else. And I think, yeah, it's great to be there. I was there when Boychuk got drafted. I was there when Boychuk was on the ice when Eb scored that world famous goal against the Russians at World Juniors. I was there at his first NHL game in LA, Carolina Hurricanes, after he had wrist surgery that summer. So I've been at some really cool times, prospects games, draft prospects games. I believe his was in Edmonton, Boychuk. So I've been to a lot of those things, but I also, for all the guys, it's important to know when you have to be there the most, and that's when they need you the most. That's the tough time. So I've definitely had to butt heads with guys, and we have certain guys over the years. Mike Green's been back in town. He talks about it, and different guys that, I've had to do stuff. And with Zach and I, we've had to battle a little bit. But you have to know what's going on beyond just what you think you see, and never let emotion be part of it. Sometimes you just got to be more stubborn. And especially at certain times, I've gone out of my way to let kind of like force a little bit of an emotional release from a player, get them to kind of get it off their chest and pull them aside, not let it become too big of a deal. But at the same time, let them release that anxiety, that emotion, that frustration. They're human beings, no different than anybody. And the biggest thing is we often forget on the pedestal that we put athletes on that they have the same emotional issues that we will have. They have the same stresses, but everything is under a huge spotlight and everything is amplified many times over because of that. And they often don't have all the skills to manage that. They've spent their life being on pedestals. They spent their life having things laid out for them. So yeah, sometimes you gotta be the one who's gonna kind of, I'll call it, just kind of release the valve a bit, let them release some of that anxiety. And yeah, guys have been pissed at me. I've had guys walk out of the gym, and I've had guys leave for a short, a summer. We didn't get along, and then they come back, and sometimes they never come back. That's up to them. And sometimes guys will come back to me and say, "Hey, like, I get it. I know I was tough to deal with." And there's also times when I have to admit when I'm wrong too, and I'm pushing guys a bit. And there's been some times where I think I've pushed too hard or dealt with people maybe a little too challenging, thinking I'm doing what's best. Maybe I made a mistake along the way too, but those are things that you learn in the process.
You ever
And
butt-
that's where the sorry, I was just gonna chime in and say one of his slogans is not for everyone. So if you know Crash, you know you have to have a certain mindset to be able to handle it and kind of stick up for yourself too. And there's definitely been a couple holes in the walls here and there, a couple broken I guess garbage cans. So it's been an interesting 20 years.
Yeah, sometimes you need to get somebody's attention, and sometimes a little bit of adrenaline ignited by a little bit of emotion and fire isn't a bad thing either. And I've learned to be a little bit less emotional and fiery all the time and pick my spots better now, maybe in the last 10 years than I was in my first 10. But those first 10 years, we drove a lot of players to be their best. And in the last 10 years, I've just basically tweaked on that and polished my approach a little bit, but I still think that he's right. I mean, it is not for everyone. It comes down to like, I expect commitment, and I expect, if we're going to state our goal to make to the levels that take more than others, we have to make sure that we do that. And you can't just say you want to be in the NHL, you got to do your work. And part of that is it's not easy. And even get to that league and being in that world, I mean, they're going to do everything they can at the professional sport level to knock you down, whether it's your competitive players, whether it's other people, whether it's people in your life not wanting you to be successful. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had to be extremely hard and have high expectations on people just to help them kind of push through all the mud that they get thrown in.
you ever battle with a player's agent or team?
Oh boy, yeah, no, for sure.
In what cases does that happen, and how does that work?
I mean, I got a million stories. Sometimes I've had to call agents and been like, hey, like, you got to do a better job with your messaging with these guys, or like quit letting, because when you get your year-end stuff, or people like, oh, you got to get bigger, you got to get stronger. Well, no shit. The kid's 17 years old. If he doesn't have to get bigger and stronger, he's got no ceiling. Like that, let's be honest. Like, quit giving people blank answers that make you feel like you've done your part. So yeah, no, there's some agents that I've had to butt heads with, and even like good friends of mine in that industry. Like, I'll butt heads if it's for the betterment of the player, and I've had to do that 100%, and probably recently. Teams a little bit too. I had to call a strength coach in the National League once with one of our young guys coming up, and I gave him crap. I said, "Hey man, like, that's not the message you give players. Like you're giving them gibberish." It was the same thing. You got to be bigger. So then the kid only had 5 weeks off. He had 5 weeks off in the summer because he was a World Junior guy. He was finished a year, and he was a first rounder. He was finished a year in the American League. They went on a long run. So I sat down with the dad and the player, made a plan. It's 5 weeks, and all they want to do is get bigger. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Like, we have to put certain integrate certain movement stuff. And I don't think it's play is just to get bigger. Let's take our time and do it the right way so you can still play. But it was a team, it was a strength coach giving him this message and kind of giving him BS. And all of a sudden he went to his junior team, and by the time he got to his NHL team, he'd been eating, just trying to bulk up. And yeah, he wasn't very good. And of course they throw me under the bus, and I'm like, man, everything I told you and I told them to do, you didn't do. So at the end of the day, and I remember this, I actually had one of their development guys talk to me about it this year in Nashville. He brought it up, and he's like, yeah, we screwed up. I'm like, yeah, damn right you did. Like, I'd given a strength coach crap, but it was a little bit of, in that world, the teams look for people to point the finger at, and it's really easy. It's either agents or a guy like myself. So you have to have pretty thick skin, and I have had to deal with that over the years. But you have to realize that my number one priority is the player and not the BS. And so sometimes I do have to stick up. But yeah, I battle with some teams, and and that's a pretty regular thing. And I battled with agents for sure, but usually they're great. They want the same thing. I just help the message become better. And what I try to do with players and with teams and agents is do my best to integrate the plan together so that everybody's on the same plan, the message is the same, and so on. I mean, Boychuk was easy. Like, he was breaking Rod Brindamore's records as a young guy. I mean, his squat record, they wouldn't give to him because they're like, oh, you can't break Rod's record. Like, when I say he was a statue, like, he was a specimen for his age, and pound for pound, might have been one of the stronger, fitter guys that could actually move and translate it that I've ever seen. And I mean, so he wasn't an issue with that stuff going there. A little bit, Boychuk and I had to have some conversations about letting the world pull you in too many directions. But when it came to his natural ability and his athleticism, there's nobody else I've seen like that.
So do you collaborate with a team strength and conditioning coach sometimes? Like, are you on the phone with Gary Roberts, maybe in Seattle talking about, Ebbs, what you guys are doing to what you're doing with him in the off season, what he's doing with him in, during season so you're, like you said, you're on the same page and you're working towards the same goals.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Nate Brookson, who's a guy in Seattle, awesome strength coach, like elite guy, really good dude. We've had a lot of conversations about, for example, on Ebbs. Like this week, I talked to the Flames guy about Dryden Hunt. He just signed with the Flames. So he called me and gave him a couple of things to kind of watch for and the direct sort of things that you have to deal with them. So yeah, no, I try to as much as I can deal with the NHL guys as well. Sometimes between their schedules and our schedules, it's not as clean as possible. When Mike Green was with the Capitals, I would fly out to Washington pretty regularly. It was part of my deal with him, my agreement with him. And as I'd fly out, and I didn't want to go in there and like kind of undermine their strength coach, Mark Namish. He was awesome, great dude. He was very welcoming. But what I went there to do is I went there to kind of build the bridge between the two of them so that Mike would be more engaging and more open to what Nemo wanted from. So my whole goal was to go out there and honestly, even if I didn't necessarily, even if I thought there was maybe a better way to do things, it had to be Nemo's way to do things during the season, so that Mike would be a better part of that team. So that was like been my job over the years. I wish it was easier to build those bridges. I mean, I think it might be a stage where I start traveling more to see guys and visit their staffs. I think that's something that I'd like to do more in the future. And then just building that rapport, but also like it's a big thing is just making sure players are on the same page as a team and looking after themselves individually, but being good teammates and being a good part of the room. And sometimes strength coaches spend most of their time at the NHL level, putting together kind of easy workouts and making sure guys are happy and making protein shakes. I don't think that's fair for how smart and how passionate a lot of those guys are. So I just want to make sure that the guys that come from us are coachable and respectful to the people around them.
That's awesome. That's a huge responsibility. I feel like in terms of, you have all these elite level athletes, and if you don't get them to buy into, your program, or if they're not doing the right things, then it can circle back on you as a business and, affect your business in itself. Or, you're sitting there going like, fuck, like I wish this guy would have done this. So he could be where I see his level reaching.
It is a little bit of a fine line trying to make sure that you get everybody buying in, and at the same time, it's tough. I mean, it's tough, but yeah, I mean, it's such a battle dealing with personalities and egos and insecurities and anxieties. So then, yeah, definitely dealing with other strength coaches, and our industry is full of ego and chest pounding and everybody, there's a lot of agendas and a lot of like people trying to keep their jobs and keep their relationships. And so I'm at a stage now that I'm not playing that game. I just want everybody to work well together. And there was a time when I would butt heads a little bit more aggressively, knowing what was better for the player. And now I just try to be, the old wise man in the corner going like, hey, how can we do this? What's best for everybody? What does everybody want out of this? Let's make it work. So that's even at a young age, dealing with players and different, helping some teams and helping some agents with players all over. I do the same thing. There's a player outside the province that I've been trying to work at integrating as track coach and strength coach and on the same page. And it hasn't been easy. Like they're just, for whatever reason, won't work that well together. And the agent, isn't super willing to jump in and take it over. So I've kind of tried to be the glue guy in between them. No value to me to help the kid. I'm not making money off it. I didn't want any money for it. I actually just wanted the people that were doing the hands-on work to get their money and get their part. I just wanted it to work well for a really talented player. And it's just people. It's a people world. So when you deal with people, you have a lot of aspects beyond, like I said, the layers that you have to deal with.
Have you ever dreamt about calling the shots in the betting world? Well, welcome to BSGG, where you can bet, swap, and play. BSGG is the first of its kind Web3 blockchain-based decentralized betting exchange. Here you have the power to be the bookie and set your own odds. Say goodbye to hidden fees, long waiting times, and the uncertainties of traditional betting platforms. With BSGG, it's a peer-to-peer experience, eliminating the need for any third party. Experience a betting platform like no other, where every stake is transparent and you can see exactly how your odds are calculated. This is the future of betting, where you hold the reins. But hold on, we are not done yet. Brace yourselves for BSGG's version 2.0, the massive upgrade to the platform. This enhancement brings the thrill of betting even to those without crypto knowledge, with the simple use of a credit card, bank transfer, or crypto deposit. And for the first time ever, an online casino with live dealers and plenty of slots right at your fingertips. The new upgrade simplifies the betting experience, allowing those with no crypto knowledge to jump right into the action in seconds. Join us today at bs.gg. Be the bookie, set your own odds, and experience betting like never before. Are you also designing the nutrition programs for all of your athletes as well? And what are your thoughts on supplements nowadays? Like you see the partnership between BioSteel and the NHL, creatine. There's all these different types of supplements guys can be taking. What are your thoughts on it? And are you designing those programs for the guys?
No, that's great. That's great as well. So I had the ability to do that. I brought in Tina Johnson. She's been someone I went to school with. I know her. She's sort of specialized in nutrition the last couple of years. She works for an NHL team north of Calgary as well that we're not supposed to mention, but she's very good at what she does. I bring her in. She's available for players. They can, if they want to really go down that rabbit hole, they have the option to hire her. She'll work for them privately as well. I try to help tweak things, and I help try to like supplement or put the pieces together, a little bit of education, but I try to hand it off to a different voice. Just to have someone who just specializes in that and a different voice, I think is always important. So I don't do that anymore. I used to do it, and over the years, I've brought people in over the years. I've done some nutritional seminars for Hockey Alberta or different agencies, but when it comes to our stuff, because I'm the predominant voice they get every day, I like to bring in other people and let their voice ring a little bit stronger and louder with people. So, but when it comes to like the supplements, yeah, BioSteel is a company. Actually, it's ironically, it's Boychuk who got BioSteel in the West. They always joke that I got them out here and got them big, but it's actually Boychuk. Boychuk came back from Carolina, and I think it was one of Gary and Matt Nichols' guys, Jay Harrison, was a D-man on the team. Is that right, Boychuk?
Yep.
I believe it was Jay Harrison was like, BioSteel is new. So Boychuk reached out to me and he's like, hey, what's this BioSteel company? I'd seen a little bit, like very vaguely online. And so I actually reached out on their website, said, hey, what's you guys' deal? This is who I am. This is why I'm asking. And so shortly after that, after having a couple conversations, Matt Nickel, John Salenza, and Mike Camilleri, I believe three of them, came by. They were the main three partners and drivers and founders of BioSteel came by. And Matt Nickel kind of being the designer of it. Johnny Salenza was sort of the business. Mike Camilleri was a client of Matt's, a friend of John's. They're all buddies from Toronto. And so they're the partners. They came by, ended up getting to know them pretty good. Where Matt Nickel is one of the guys I trusted most, guys I respect most nowadays, a friend of mine. And that's where I got to meet those guys. And that's how I got connected with BioSteel. Since then, John's no longer with me. I've heard Matt's no longer with BioSteel. BioSteel's been bought out by a bigger company. We use their product. It's very good. I also use a company, Momentous, for certain things like creatine. I believe if a player is getting their full diet, they should get most of what they need in a really clean diet. But with the schedules today and the needs to get calories in and keep energy levels and electrolytes, I think there is a need to supplement in that setting. Try to be careful of the companies that we use. Momentous has been a really good company that I was sort of directed through to a couple of NHL contacts. I've been working with them this year. And then BioSteel, I continue to work with. They're the new face of the National Hockey League as far as the drinks and all that stuff. BioSteel is taking over from Gatorade. So I'm particular about what I bring from each company, but I do believe that in the right situation, supplements are a good option to add to what a player is getting in their daily meals.
Man, Chucky, you gotta hook us up with that BioSteel brand deal for the podcast. What are you doing?
I remember, I remember reaching out probably like legit like 12 years ago saying, hey, you guys should think about sponsoring me. I have a big Twitter account, and they said that they could only have one NHL player be the guy, and I think it was like Carey Price was the guy, or Tyler Sagan or something. So I don't know what I was doing, even thinking I had a chance, but now they sponsor the whole league and probably a bunch of other leagues too.
Yeah, before they got NHL sanctioning, they would have only been able to have one guy. But you let them know, Boyd, you're the OG. They joke about me being the one that brought them out, and other supplement companies have come to me and been like, hey, we want to get you involved. We know you brought BioSteel big in the West, blah blah blah. I'm like, the truth is, it was Boyd, you're the OG.
Wild story.
Giving credit where credit is due. So into kind of going back to supplements and such, obviously there's protein, super important. Creatine can be really important. Are those, maybe multivitamins? What other, supplements would you recommend depending on player, and what kind of stuff would you just say stay away from for, young athletes coming up, that are, because I remember being a teenager, kind of coming through high school, being an athlete. All these new supplements are coming out. You're always looking for, something, whether it's like a pre-workout to give you that extra edge in the gym, or, whatever it is. What's kind of the advice that you give to these young guys coming up?
Yeah, a couple of things. So I think the basics and people who are taking supplements, yeah, multivitamins, great. Vitamin D is an important vitamin. Your omega-3, your fish oils, your essential fatty acids are really important. Protein with carbohydrates, not without. So something like the BioSteel recovery formula, momentous recovery is what we bring in. The BioSteel active recovery formula has been great. It's got a whole bunch of stuff that's in there that involved in like some greens in there. You want the proteins, you need to have carbohydrates for fuel. I think it's really important that we don't get caught up on the trend of like low carbing it or managed carb, especially for young athletes, when you need to have fuel to play in the burn and the train. From there, creatine is one of the most studied and positively influencing of all the supplements. It doesn't make someone bigger, but some of the things that it's involved in studies, and like there's studies right now, older population with helping with dementia and helping with brain recovery. And so as you start to go down the rabbit hole of creatine, it's become bigger in non-athletic demographic populations than it is maybe in the athletic population. It still is great and potentiating, basically workouts, getting quality out of workouts. You get a little bit of we'll call it cell water filling of some regards, but it tends to lead to some lean muscle gain, which we want. Always been big on the creatine. I think it's a valuable. There's different ways to take it. Different nutritionists, you might have loading, not loading, taking 3 grams, 5 grams. You got to decide on what you want out of that and what you think you need. And I think that that's very individual. For sure, everybody should be taking protein as far as muscle recovery, and the carbs help with that. So I think, like I said, the recovery formulas versus like just a protein by itself tend to be the better option especially for athletes. And there's some vitamins, there's some other things that are good. You're seeing a lot, like Joe Rogan obviously talks on his stuff about a lot of different supplements he takes. Some stuff not so great. Straight up, I've taken a little bit of everything. As a young guy, and even post hockey, I was taking. At one point I was taking like 30 pills a day plus 3 or protein shakes, and I look now for our athletes to take like tested supplements. Back then, I was definitely not worried about that. I was taking stimulants. I was taking ECA stacks were really big in the 90s. Ephedrine, caffeine, aspirin. So you got dilated, you got fired up, you had no muscle pain. So there's that as well. I've taken it all. Ultimate Orange was a big one. It's banned now. I was taking that late in my hockey career. I'd take it in a water bottle and sip it. It tastes like orange chalk. I'm pretty sure the deja vus I was having in university was from stored ephedrine in my fat cells. And when I was lean enough and I was constantly burning, I'd have weird deja vu like regularly during the day. So I don't think that was the way to go. I've taken a little bit of everything, to be honest with you. And obviously, as you're done hockey and I'm in the gyms all the time, I had a lot of people I knew taking steroids and illegals and other performance enhancing drugs, and I've been around that. And I don't recommend it, but for young athletes, you have to think what the long game is. The long game is getting better, and adding 30 pounds to a 150, 60 pound frame isn't going to make anybody better. It's going to slow you down. Make sure you do it the right way, and training will be more valuable than adding quick fixes. So that'd be the big one. Like I said, it's all out there. There's a lot of stuff going on medically in the medicine with growth hormones and not helping with certain injury recovery and with platelet, red blood cell spinning in that. And so that's a realm that I'm not going down.
There are some crazy supplements out there. I mean, you don't see too much of them anymore now that a lot of things are regulated, but I mean, even there were some supplements like some pre-workouts that would get dragged over from the US before they got regulated that were like there was one called Black Orange, I remember, and it was literally made in like an underground lab, and right on the label it said may cause positive drug test. I was like, sick. Okay, well, let's try it.
Well, that was Ultimate Orange for me. Probably very similar. Ultimate Orange was sort of it was like the OG of like crazy stuff. Like honestly, you remember those like fat stubby water bottles in hockey back in the day? I would have it would be under. I'd sip. It was I broke it down like a little bit before warm up, a little bit more before the first, then the second, then the third, and then basically done. And honestly, after a game, maybe whatever 10 o'clock, go home. I wasn't asleep until like 1 or 2 in the morning. I was so wired from that and stimulant like and. And so, I mean, like I guess I've seen it all. C4, you can buy it all over the place for the longest time. Every kid was taking C4. It's like they're all wired and can't focus and you can't figure out why. Then a few years ago, especially at the university level, Adderall.
Yeah.
Adderall was up for a lot of people were getting Adderall. I know I'm not going to throw the names down. I know of a player whose strength coach threw away his BioSteel. He believed it wasn't tested. Ironically, BioSteel's true testing was happening at a laboratory at the university this player was playing at, yet the team was accessing Adderall to players so they could study while they were traveling and playing. So just like the things that you see and the hypocrisy of that is pretty funny. So, and that was all, like I said, that was a few years ago, but that was sort of one of the more like blatantly, like, what are you doing things that I've seen. But yeah, no, I mean, Adderall's heavily overused now and both in athletic, but general population, the work world. And it's needed for some people for sure. And some people are able to get, higher learning or higher level working by taking something like that. That's a big one that you're seeing. And the Black Orange, the Ultimate Orange for sure, like all that stuff. Like, and then a lot of supplement companies have also been blamed for failed drug tests, been used as a cover. I believe for athletes, not hockey, but athletes in general. Oh, I must have been in a supplement I was taking, and then weird how it's suspiciously that supplement gets tested. There's a small amount of it in it, even though the bloodstream levels that athlete had were quite higher. It's really easy to throw a company under the bus rather than say, yeah, I was taking these things trying to get an advantage. So I think that's also been something that we've seen the last, whatever it is, 20 years now that everybody's like, oh, you can't take this company because guys are testing it. It's like, no, those guys were just taken. They were just taken. The reality is they're taken.
Wow, this has been awesome. Zach, do you have anything else that you want to touch on?
No, I think it's been great. How long have we been going for now, Kyle? I haven't really been paying attention.
I think about 40 minutes, just under.
40 minutes. Yeah, I mean, if you want to ask a couple more questions, whatever. How much time you got, Crash?
I'm good. I'm going to jump out on the floor and watch some guys training. I got alumni Mike Green in the gym today, along with a couple young guys that are not skating, that are not normally at 9 o'clock. Now that Zach's away, all the young kids will play. They come and slide into the prime times.
One thing on the topic of supplements and such, not necessarily a supplement, but have you done much research into, and if you have, what are your thoughts into mushrooms and like microdosing psilocybin in terms of athletes helping with brain function or brain injuries from previous, especially in like fighters and other football players? I've heard it being used a lot now. Have you done much research into that? And if so, what are your thoughts?
No, I haven't. I'm just gonna be a little bit more opinion based, but I have not. I know of players who have. I know of some former players who have sworn by it. One of the things that always concerns me is people will always find a reason to want to support something that they get some type of pleasure from or whatever, whether it's mental release, whether it's some pain-free. There's definitely going to be some value in it. I think no different than, when they legalized marijuana. I'm not against it. I'm not for it. But I thought that they opened up the chamber to like, oh, it's healthy, it's natural, it helps with this, versus, maybe there's other things that people don't want to tell you, the realities of, marijuana use and people under the age of 24 when the brain is still in development. That's shown to have some negative effects long term. I think with the micro dosing and stuff, the same thing. You can get some positives. If people want if they want you to believe in their opinion, they'll give you the information they got. And then at the same time, in the way that we are, especially, I don't know if it's just the last few years, but we seem to be managed. Our opinions get managed heavily by the media nowadays, social media, the media, how we get our information. I'm not a political guy, but I think that politics has taken over our information, and it's hard to trust the information we get nowadays because it's so bought and paid for by, you hear big pharma, whatever. I don't know the answer to that. I just know that I'm not prepared to really be a believer in things right now without a little bit longer run on the information and then a little more truthfulness and clarity and transparency with it as well.
Fair enough. Cool. Last one for me. You've trained obviously hundreds, if not thousands, of elite athletes coming up. From juniors to the NHL, guys that have won Stanley Cups. Duncan Keith, Adin Hill. I saw on your website. Who was the first guy that you trained to win a cup, and what was that feeling for you? Was it did you have a huge sense of accomplishment? Were you already deep enough in where you were happy for him, but it's still business is business?
Yeah, you know what? Well, I mean, one, Adin trained with us at a young age, and then I haven't seen him in years. He's really, really happy for him and Logan Thompson, two guys that with Vegas that had spent some time with us and they're younger. And with Duncan Keith, it was different. I mean, I was pretty involved at the time. So I go back, I had a pretty good run of times where Zach was a young guy in the National League trying to make his way. Jordan Eberle, same thing. Mike Green and Duncan Keith, and Carey Price had spent time with us in the summers, and Ray Emery and all these guys, and it was rolling pretty good. And it was Thomas Hickey, and when Dunk was, I remember it was against Philadelphia. I think Michael Leighton was the goalie with the Flyers at the time. I mean, it was kind of a Cinderella run for him. And Dunk was going through the playoffs. I think I'd been up there earlier in the season. I'd seen him a bunch during the season. And that was that was a year where I believe that was a year where Greener scored 31 that year. The year previous, he was a Norris Trophy candidate, lost to Chara. And so around the playoffs, I would be like early on in our summer, and I was working a lot. We had all these young upcoming guys. This young kid, Zach Boychuk kid, I got to get his kid over the hump. I got to get underneath that some other guys coming up through the system that I just wanted to be involved. His wife, Dunk's wife, was calling me, hey, text me, hey, be here. We'll get you tickets, everything. You tell us when you want to come. Yeah, I'll come. And I remember being like, I think it was day 1 and 6. And I said, it was like, I had like 2 days to get there. And I'm like, it's going to go to 7. I'll come for game 7 when they win. And obviously they won in 6. A little bit with me having a hard time, like getting away. A little bit me is a hard time, just like I have a hard time having fun. Butch joked about I can be. I'm not all business all the time, but I have a hard time. I have a really difficult time as a personality, as a person. I'm sure it's something. And if I went through counseling, I'd be like, Matt Crash, you need to like relax a bit and enjoy things. Like you've had the world of these unbelievable experiences, and you never allow yourself to enjoy it. I think that's a stage in my life where I really had a difficult time enjoying how good it was. And then like I was so driven to make sure that everybody else got the same opportunity, and I was so crazy about it. So I wasn't there for it, and I regret it. I didn't go to his cup party because I didn't want to jinx myself. I didn't want to go. I did set up. He did a really cool Bobby Orr style picture with the cup and a white T-shirt, and I got it all done up. And I had a canvas company that I was connected to. They did a pretty cool, like huge frame canvas. I was involved behind the scenes. I never went. That year it was Mike Green, Duncan Keith, and Drew Doughty were the 3 Norris Trophy candidates. It was in Vegas. So 2 of those guys are my clients. We were talking about it last night at dinner with Greener, and I remember being like, I got to go, but I knew one of my guys was going to lose for sure, maybe 2. And rightfully, I thought Greener probably should have won that. Dunk actually brought that up too when I saw him. Never I saw him last, saw him recently. He brought that up too. He was like, I got 31 goals. I mean, Dunk was the best player in the world that year at times. I mean, he went to the Olympics, won the Stanley Cup. And when it came to regular season, Mike Green just scored 31 goals. For the first time a D had scored that many goals in years. He broke a 25-year NHL games with goals in a row record. I mean, nobody's hit 31 since then. When I think the second most team end goals that year were like 15 where now there's 3 or 4 guys in the hunt for 30 this year. To give you an idea, like relatively speaking, that was a very outlying season for a D-man, but he was sort of the bad boy of the NHL at the time. He kind of the tattoos and the one-dimensional offensive guy. So we were talking about dinner last night, and I remember when Dunk and Greener first met, and then Greener was like, "How does Dunk so good at this?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." He talked to him, and then same time, like half an hour later, 20 minutes later, Dunk comes to the gym and from the ice. He's like, "Hey man, how does Greener score so much? Like, why don't you guys have a conversation among each other? Like, sit down and actually." And sure enough, there's an article that was in the Associated Press that talked about that. How I think actually Zach's name, Boychuk, your name's mentioned in the article as one of my clients. I'll have to look for it. I'll post it this week. I have it all canvas. Like same canvas company made me a canvas of it too. But I remember that was kind of the beginning for both those guys, and they both ended up having. Dunk had a breakout season. Greener kept going along his trajectory for a while, and but yeah, so I think I missed out on enjoying it. If I could go back in time, I would probably have enjoyed myself more. I just didn't want to be. I remember a buddy telling me, "You got to be more human." I didn't want to be human. I didn't want to make a mistake and let the foot off the gas for guys. I didn't want Zach Boychuk's, the Jordan Eberles to think it's okay to be casual. I wanted them to hunt for success, and I think I messed up for my own good. I mean, to be honest with you, too.
Wow.
I think as a player, you really appreciate that. You're obviously the guy that's in the rinks every day, and I think most trainers they go through the summer, they get their 3 or 4 months, and then they kind of take the winter off. You're the complete opposite. You know, you're going talking with all the agents, talking with all the teams. You do your daily rink thing every day on Instagram during the winter time. So I'm wondering, how many rinks do you plan on getting this year? And like obviously you got to go to the draft again this year in Nashville to see some of your players get drafted again, and like we appreciate that. You know, having you at my first NHL game was incredible. So you still plan on doing that the next 20 years, or what's your outlook coming here in the next little bit?
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, you know what? I can tell you this much: this winter is going to be sort of the same. I'm excited about a lot of things. I'm excited about our guys playing. We have a great crop in the draft this year. Andrew Basha, the Minnesota Tigers, Carter Yakimchuk, Calgary Hitmen, Harrison Bernick from the Kamloops Blazers, and there's some additional players I think are going to have some opportunity to get drafted later or a little bit later in the draft. So we got some really good upcoming players, and then the following up in that, the next couple of years, we'll have another run of guys. Hopefully that can be in the same spot. It's great to go to games. My son plays. You know, I throw the odd gym of the day. My daughter plays volleyball. I mean, it's a pretty good run. I don't know what I would do if I had to become domesticated and be home at 5 every day. I like to be at the rinks, and the rink of the day, the rink of the night thing became kind of, it was me being sarcastic. It was people like, man, I started doing that. People like, man, you've been to a lot of rinks lately. I'm like, I've been to a lot of rinks for 20 years. And at the point, that was after probably 3 major trips I took in a matter of like 6 weeks, like Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, Regina, Moose Jaw trip. I didn't even think of it then. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, one day it was like a running joke. I went rink of the night, and I don't know why I was in wherever I was. And the next day, people are texting me, "Hey, where are we going?" I'm like, "What do you mean, where are we going?" They're like, "Let's go to a game, rink of the night, rink of the whatever." And I'm like, "Oh." So for the next week, I had people texting me all the time, like, "Hey." And then I'd ask me, "Come back tonight?" They're like, "No, one's good." I'm like, "Oh, I'm going anyway." So I had different guys jump in the vehicle with me or meet me at the rink, and it ended up being pretty funny. I'm gonna probably have to continue that. I feel weird. Social media to me is such a like look at me thing sometimes, and I try to be smart ass. I don't know if people always get my sarcasm, but it was me being sarcastic about all the damn rinks I was at. And then people would be like, other people like staff and buddies that worked for us in the past would send me pictures of the rinks they're at. So I'd have to post that. And I got a kick out of that. I think it's when you're in sport, you have to realize as a player, as someone who's working in the media or the entertainment side of it, as someone on my side and the coaching side of it, like fucking rights. We realize for one that you're actually blessed to do something really awesome. And you're doing something that we all dreamt of. Like, yeah, I didn't make the NHL. And quite frankly, I haven't worked for an NHL team, but I've been in the NHL for 20 years. I've worked with NHL players. I chose my logo and my team tracksuit to be the players. The crash conditioning is really just, I work for the players. And so I understand how that responsibility is so important, but it's also a huge blessing to be able to do that. And I think it's really cool. So I take a lot of fun. I do think going to the rinks matters. Boych, your NHL draft it's pretty funny. I'll tell you two things about Boychuk. Two things that meant a lot to me. One was you're adamant that I sat by you at the draft. You're telling your agents, like, no, I want Crash here, I want Crash here. Your poor girlfriend at the time had to move like 3 seats over. And finally, I'm like, no, I'll just sit. I think I was sitting right in front of you. I remember correctly. And I remember Eberle was in the same draft, and Mikhail Bodker, Bodge was the same agency. That was easy. But Ebbs was across the stands from us. So we kind of knew you were going ahead of him at the time. So we're like, okay, I'll see what Boychuk to start. And then Ebbs just texts me, Crash, you got to get over. You got to get over. I'm like, hey, it's good. It's good. It's going to work out. And I'm texting his agent, and I'm like, hey, is there a spot for me? And they had a bunch of guys go early. He's like, no, don't worry. By the time Ebbs goes, there'll be lots of open seats. And sure enough, I got down beside Ebbs. We're getting around whatever 25th spot. You're already upstairs in the suite with the Carolina Hurricanes. You get there whining and dining you, telling you how great the world's going to be. And Ebbs is sitting there sweating like crazy at me. And I looked over to him. I say, relax, you're good. One of those kind of thing. So, I mean, your draft was good. Your first NHL game, my wife and kids and I were in San Diego in California on a vacation when you texted me, hey, I'm going to play. I'm like, holy, we could expand our trip 2 or 3 days. We're already going to be out there. I didn't have to fly anywhere. It was perfect. So my whole family came to the game. There's nobody at the game on a Friday night in LA in like October because it was so freaking hot and beautiful outside. You had your family. Culpy, your old coach, was there. I think that's his name. I remember being there in the corner. Kopitar's family wasn't far from us. My kids were running around in the aisles. They were pretty young at the time. And so after the game, we had car service, limo service from this hotel at the airport, absolute hole at the airport. The guy that dropped us off was great. He was going to pick us up, or his partner was going to pick us up. Well, his partner picked us up, made us walk across a busy street in LA with my little kids. We at one point, this is no word of a lie. At one point, I was texting Jared Bouquet, your agent, and going, "Hey, Booksy, there's something going on with my limo driver. If this is where we are, if I'm gonna put the phone, I'm gonna ring you and leave it running if something bad happens." I was on the verge of jumping over the seat and keying his eyeballs out and killing him because I thought he was doing something shady. Like he was on the phone doing drug deals. We were in the back of this limo car service. The guy was making a plan to figure out when, like we're going through shady LA, all the windows and doors were barred after this game at like 11, shortly after 11, we come to see Zach after the game, talk to him. And by the time you get out of there, and I legit was planning, my wife talked about it. I was planning on having to kill this guy to protect my family. And I'd already figured it out. I had my keys, my one key in between my fingers and my knuckles. And on my right hand, I knew if I jumped over, I'd have to grab him and try to stab him in probably the eyes and start and go from there. And then I had to do it when we were kind of at a stop or a slow roll. So actually a pretty scary time with your first NHL game. Was my first almost heart attack from adrenaline.
Holy. Zach, did you know that was going on?
I don't think I ever heard that story. That's the first one for me. That's I would have felt pretty bad inviting you to the game, and then you would ended up in jail after fighting for your family.
It was pretty scary, to be honest with you. And I remember get to the hotel finally, getting my people out of the vehicle, and I absolutely shredded on the front. The concierge of this crappy whatever 4 Seasons in LA at the airport that we'd booked, just thinking we'd get rid of our rental car, do that, it would be easy. Just it was LA was so hard to drive, and I just remember. And then the next day, the other guy was waiting for me. I thought we were gonna get into it. He was apologizing to me. I was like, "Get me the hell out of LA! I'm never coming back." And I legit was planning on. I thought I was going to kill a man to save my family, and to be quite honest with you, I was okay with that, but it was going to go down for sure.
Wow,
That's what happens in BC in the mountains. You gotta fight for your own, eh? You never know. You're ready.
Small town living, man.
Yeah. What a way to end it, man. Thank you so much again for coming on. We really appreciate it. We know, like I said at the beginning, you're super busy, so thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. And Zach, for showing up jet lagged after a long trip back to Germany to play this season. Yeah, thank you again, and we'll get this podcast out tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks a lot, Crash. Enjoy the rest of the summer. Get those boys going.
Make sure this is a great season, Boychuk.
I will do. Year 15.
All right, boys. Have a good one.